Oh, connecting. Hey, we're in.
So, hello, Alicia.
Hi, Lynn.
So we've got together. We decided that we're going to have a conversation because we're both coaches, both neurodivergent coaches. I've ADHD, you're autistic, and we got together and had a chat about communication, which we're both really interested in. And we're both thinking, gosh, there's so much about communication across neurotypes. And it's something I've been really thinking about for years. I've got neurodivergent children who've grown up, and I've got an autistic son. And I was very aware as he was growing up that my communication was different from his. But that's how I came to view it. It was different communication, not disordered, which often gets put onto autistic people. And so we thought it'd be really interesting to have a conversation and think about what is right communication, what is wrong communication, is there such a thing, and what could it be like if we just thought it's different?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while since since we spoke last time about having this chat. And obviously we also spoke about it quite a few times over probably years. I think it's been that long. And I was reflecting on it quite recently as well as I work with my coaching clients. I see it quite a lot when I mostly work with autistic professionals who are employed, and often, well, most of my clients are autistic. They often have ADHD managers. So it's certainly also very, very, I would say, quite relevant to me right now at this point in time. And yeah, I've been personally really fascinated by communication, by languages, and I suppose how people, how people communicate, because I think it's such a crucial need in terms of also belonging. So, yeah, very excited to be, I suppose, comparing the notes and sharing
Yeah.
experiences.
So what do you think are the key differences, Alicia, between autistic communication and other communication? Obviously, everyone's different. We can't say that everyone communicates like this, but what are some of the main threads of difference that you see?
Again, I'm going to generalize, but I think it's for the purpose of yeah, having a discussion around it. From what I can see, and I suppose also can see for myself, I like having a structure. I need to have a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen next week, next month, have it in a very visual format. I cannot cope with just a lot of text. Um, so I like to see like a visual timetable and have enough details really to, I suppose, help with that anxiety and uncertainty. So autistic people have this really strong need for certainty. That as a result means we do like to know what is happening, what and what's going to happen. Now, my experience in terms of people with ADHD is more, well, I'm quite happy and to see what happens, take it easy, go with the flow, adjust to whatever else might be happening, and maybe not having to know as much. I wonder if you'd agree with that.
I think to some extent, yes, but honestly I think it's so situationally variable. So it might actually depend on what's going on with the task that we're doing
Okay.
or what's happening in the environment with the people around us. And I think for everyone, getting more certainty can calm the nervous system down. But I would agree with you, just from my own experience of working with autistic people and autistic family members, there seems to be a need to ask more questions to understand the process. And I think the times when I haven't understood that with my son, it felt like I was being bombarded. It felt like a bombardment of requests. But once I realized actually he wasn't doing that because the certainty was going to calm his system down and allow him to be more relaxed, and communicate at his best, it made it a lot easier for me to not mind answering the questions, because it was going to work out being better for both of us.
And I like that you bring it up, because I think actually, one of the things that autistic people, I suppose, hear from other people is, asking far too many questions. And I think sometimes the way it can be understood is, I suppose, other people can see it as difficult. Why are you making things so difficult? I think other people can feel threatened by it as well.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the other key differences between autistic communication and other communication?
Mm. Trying to think. I mean, I'm biting my tongue because on one hand, I want to say autistic people tend to be quite, I don't know, maybe linear in their thinking. I suppose they want to know what happened before, what's happening now, what's going to happen next. So maybe not necessarily linear, but having enough context is very, very important. Whereas I think maybe other people might be quite happy. Okay, what do you want me to do? I'll just go with it. Whereas I think autistic people like to know, well, why are we doing this? And where is it going to feed into? Sort of trying to, on one hand, have enough information for the task, but also maybe try to see the connections. Yeah, how do you
Yeah.
feel that relates to ADHD thinking style?
Yeah, I think for a lot of ADHD, it's because our brains are wired for interest. We need to be able to also see how what we're trying to do fits in with the importance, because so often the interest can trump the importance. So we kind of need some slowing down to grab hold of the importance. So once we've got that, that can really help keep us on track. But I do think if we can't see the point in what we're doing in the moment, it's very hard to activate on that and to get going on it. So I don't know if it's the same thing or a different thing.
You made me think about, again, another characteristic of autistic way of being is around what I suppose the medical language would classify special interest. I like to think of these things as areas of interest, deep passions, right? And I think that's similar in terms of autistic people. Once they are interested in a topic, it's a deep dive into this topic. And that could be to the detriment of other things that other people consider as important.
Yeah, and I think ADHD brains can get hyper focused on interest as well, which if other people don't understand that interest drive, it can probably be really confusing how you can spend several hours and forget to eat or go to the toilet, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and I think if we think about the other side of that and how that links to communication, often what people see is someone who talks a lot at length without stopping.
Yeah. And actually, if that is happening to you, and my son did this a lot when he was growing up, um, and I didn't want him to have that experience of um, other people politely finding him boring, because I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable getting out of a conversation that they found themselves in where someone's talking about their interest and they haven't got the direct way of letting the person know that they don't want to engage in the conversation. And my son definitely had difficulty growing up picking up on whether the person he was speaking to wanted to engage or not. So we did a lot of playing around trying to figure out, well, what are the signs that someone's interested and what are the signs that they're not? Because we knew that if he said to them, are you interested in having this conversation with me about this topic? People would lie. They would say yes, because people found it really hard to be honest especially with a child. They were being nice, but actually it's not nice to be bored by someone. So I didn't want him to experience that. So we did lots of like trying to figure out we had to really think, because we had to think, what are the signs that someone wants to engage? We would say, you give a bit of information and then pause and see if people are coming back on the same topic. Are they asking questions on the same topic? If they are, you can probably keep the engagement going because they're using that sign. If they keep looking away, if they are fidgeting more than usual, and it was really tricky because everyone's got a different base level of fidgeting, but that's probably a sign that they're not interested. So we gave him that kind of thing to play around with, and often it meant he stopped talking about mathematics to people who didn't want to talk about that subject. But every now and again, he'd find someone who'd done a maths degree years ago that we didn't even realise, and he'd spend a couple of hours having a really wonderful conversation with someone who wanted to have the conversation with him, and that was great. That's a good experience. But it's really hard to know, isn't it? If you don't read, if it's difficulty getting below the surface of what people are saying to understand if they want to engage with you or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two things that I've been thinking about as you've been speaking. I think the first one is, how lovely, as in, it's not that your son shouldn't talk about mathematics to anyone. It's about, I suppose, just finding the people that also have a similar interest with whom he can talk about the topic at length, right? And I think that's, I suppose, something to be honored and something to be respected and encouraged, which I think is really lovely. Oh yeah, something else. Yes, I know in terms of, I think especially the British culture, of being so super polite. It's such a hard world to navigate.
Yeah. Do you think there's some cultures which are better suited to fit with autistic communication style?
I would say so, definitely. So I would say I'm originally from Poland, so certainly Poland, Germany tend to be more direct in the language. Even one example of the language is, and that's something that really baffled me, is how often you use please in English. In my native language, we only say please when we, I suppose, really mean it. There isn't a please in most of sentences. And I suppose even like sarcasm, I think British humor is very particular in this respect as well. I suppose haven't found in my native culture. So yeah, I think to some extent it's probably even more difficult, I suppose, to be autistic in the British society. On the other hand, maybe I get a bit of a leeway because people might say, oh, it's fine. Alicja doesn't get it because she hasn't grown up here. But
Mm.
equally, I think it still makes it more difficult.
It's interesting you should say that because I honestly cannot because of my memory, which is not great. I can't remember where I read this, but I'm pretty sure that there's a higher proportion of autistic adults who are in relationship with people who are from a different country of origin. So it's more common to have a cross-cultural match for autistic adults. And I don't know what you think about that.
My goodness, that I haven't heard of it, and I'm like, I'm so desperate for a reference. I think again, I think quite often autistic people tend to be very open-minded.
Mm.
So I think from that perspective, I can see that, and maybe I suppose, um, yeah, maybe there are also some common experiences, whether that's exclusion from some when it comes to certain environments or contexts. Maybe I suppose as well, if you come from a country that has a different sense of humor, then I suppose you need to be more, I don't know, maybe simplify the language that you use, or maybe also like cultural references, not just humor. Um, I suppose you do need to simplify the language.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's just an acceptance of there's going to be communication differences
Hmm. Perhaps,
because of
yeah.
cultural differences layered on. And it might just make it a really normal part of the relationship to expect there to be some communication differences between the two of you.
Yeah, and I suppose not just differences, but that need to clarify what is meant, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why this has made me think of this because
Okay, let's go with it.
that happens with me all the time. But I'm just remembering my experience of being at Autscape, which I know is a conference that you've been to and spoken at, and it's a conference organised by and a conference for autistic people. And I attended a few years ago with my son. He wasn't an adult, so he needed a parent to go with him. And that was so interesting for me to really understand. We're talking about difference because that conference was really geared up for autistic communication. And I found it really interesting because my son and I, we switched we switched the normal way of being in the world in that conference. And that was so eye-opening for me. And there's some of the things I noticed were around clarity. There's a lot of information about clarity of process and what was going to happen and when, spoken at length. But also really clear signaling of who wanted to communicate and when. Um, and that was a really gave him a lot more energy. Also, I noticed that people weren't doing a lot of small talk, so there wasn't connection happening around, hi, where are you from? What do you do? That didn't seem to be the way of connecting. What I heard was people having quite quickly going into topic conversations. And it was just a very different way of engaging.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up. Yeah, I've been to Autscape in terms of the residential part of the conference slash retreat twice now. And my goodness, especially the very first time, it was such a shock to the system. Um, it was, in a way, it felt really weird initially, the first day especially, because I was just not used to it. But I think what I really appreciated about it is how much freer I thought and how much like all the overthinking about should I do this? Should I say that? It was just gone because I didn't have to. I was sort of, with my people. No one will be offended if I just leave a group. No one will be offended and no one will, I suppose, tell me a polite lie if I say, is it okay if I join? I knew that people would say, oh, we're having a conversation about this topic, or it's a closed group, or whatever it is. And I suppose I knew where I stood. And I think that was it was very freeing, but also very strange and different. And I still remember after the first conference, going to the train station and being like, oh my goodness, such a different world. I wish I could be still at Autscape. And yeah, last year was very emotional, I remember. Oh, I might get emotional now. But
Yeah,
anyway, I think for some people it's you know, such an experience. I remember someone just starting to cry, and we were like, what do you need? Like, would you like a hug? I can leave you alone, because it was towards the end of the conference, and it was sort of, this is it. It was so lovely, and this person went like, yay, give me a hug. Um, yeah, I think it really highlights to me that importance of spaces that are designed with autistic needs in mind, and having that community as well.
yeah, yeah. I just thought the level of clarity about people's communication needs was completely different to anything I'd experienced before.
Yeah, so in particular, there's the sort of the interaction card. So on the lanyard, you have a choice of cards that indicate whether you want to engage in a conversation, or whether you don't, but also whether you need a little bit of you'd like to engage, but you need a little bit more help with being engaged in a conversation as well. I thought that was just genius because it
Yeah.
removes all the, I suppose, small talk, checking, trying to figure out if the other person wants to talk to you or not.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really good. Another thing I'm thinking is a difference for some autistic people and some people who aren't autistic is the facial expression. So, and it's almost like the inability to fake smile or social smile. I don't know. There's something around that. Now some autistic people have mask, so can mask that, and that's a whole other conversation for us to have another time probably. But some autistic people are not masking, and so that they're smiling when they genuinely feel there's something to smile about, and that might not be when I have entered the room. They're there, and it might not be when I've checked trying to check in how they are. So my son's first term at university, I thought he was having a really terrible time because if I asked him how he was, he had quite a blank facial expression. He wasn't masking with me.
Mm.
And even though I know him really well, and I know that's not part of how he necessarily communicates, I'm not expecting him to do a fake smile or anything. It still drew me into a slight level of stress as a mother, thinking, is he okay? Actually, I could trust him to give me the honest answer. He was telling me he was okay with his words, but I wasn't getting the face that I would be using to communicate that I'm okay. Because it's different. It doesn't mean anything for him, I don't think, in that way. Because when he came back home and I saw him, I said, what's it been like? He said, that's been the best few months of my life so far. I didn't
Oh,
get that from his facial expression. And I wish I'd remembered that because it would have been a lot more relaxing for me as his mum to remember that for him, I can trust his verbal communication, his words. His words carry the meaning.
yeah, but it can be so hard because obviously, I mean, a lot of what is happening, how we are supposed to communicate, is how our bodies, how our brains respond to the signals and the communication we get, right? So it's not just the words, it's also the non-verbal input and what you are used to seeing, I suppose, in terms of that social construct. Um, and what you expect to see and how you, I suppose, equate smile means everything is fine. Blank face is confusion, or potentially something else. Oh, non-verbal communication. Yeah. I know that I have a very expressive face. Um, now half of the time it's just weird expressions, which is fine. But there's one particular thing that really gets me into trouble, and that's more in terms of personal relationships. It's really hard. It's sort of similar to the story you shared. So sometimes my husband will say things, and I know that I sort of overreact. Well, my face overreacts, and what he sees is an expression of disgust. And he finds it very difficult. And then I suppose that really tells me, oh, why are you so like disgusted by what I just said? And when I say in words, actually, when I clarify in words, certainly my reaction isn't at that level. But it's really hard. And to be fair, often I don't realize it's on him to tell me, oh, you've reacted rather strongly, like your face reacted really strongly. And sometimes that, feeling of, well, what he experiences as disgust, I think it's just confusion and processing and trying to figure out what he's trying to say, but that's
Yeah,
not what he experiences. So that I
yeah,
think, if we really think about many of the conflicts and the breakdowns of communication is that difference between, I suppose, the intent and the impact.
yeah, definitely. And I think it can be that we see something and we make assumptions on the basis of what we're seeing. And actually, if we can separate out, this is what I've seen. You look a bit disgusted. I'm assuming that you're really cross with me, or whatever it might be. But that's the assumption, isn't it? And maybe if there's more openness or an ability to separate and communicate, this is what I've seen, this is what I've noticed, and this is what that's making me think. There's a chance to have a kind of a clarification. Say, oh no, actually, I was just processing. It might be something completely different. And actually, if we know what's really going on, if we understand someone's intent, and if we can get to the intent, it's often a really good intent and it makes sense. And when things make sense, I think it calms everyone down.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that has happened a few times as well. I think sometimes things that come out of my mouth, they don't really register in my own head. And to be fair, I think if anything, it just shows, I suppose, the solidity of my relationship again with my husband, because he would I think he's brave and courageous enough to say, sometimes it takes him a few minutes, but he will be like, what you said a few minutes ago really hurt me. I'm like, what did I say? Because I have no recollection. And then he tells me word by word, and I'm like, did I really say that? That is horrible, right? But because he has that, I suppose, courage to say, first of all, there's something that you said that really hurt me. This is what it is. We can actually have a conversation. I can repair it by saying, I'm really sorry, that's not what I meant. And maybe clarify, well, this is what I intended to say.
Yeah, yeah. That takes a lot of honesty.
It
So it takes,
does.
yeah,
I've seen that in the workplace as well. Maybe not as much as I'd like to, but I think some of the good examples that I've seen is, and I know sometimes I may say things that, well, I didn't quite mean. I think what I appreciated about my colleagues or some of my colleagues would be, at the point when I said something that potentially could be misunderstood, someone else would chip in and say, I think what Alicja is trying to say is XYZ. And I'd be like, yeah, that's what I said. To sort of, I suppose, manage the situation.
yeah. I think it's almost about, it's almost like there's a social, there's something around softening language, which I think a lot of neurotypical people do. There's a softening, and then rather than just an answer to a question being no, because you know you've been asked to do something, it's not going to work out for you. No, and that's the answer. But it's almost like there's this flowery softening or padding, and that's to try and keep everyone feeling safe.
Mm, yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, maybe that partly explains why I really don't like emails. It's a lot of hard work because for me,
Yeah,
writing an email is, hi, this is what I need. Thank you. This is the deadline. That's it. This is what I need. Give it to me. That would be what I want to say, but I know I can't. I need to think, oh, I should add something nice, like how was your weekend? And to be fair, there might be people where I'm genuinely really interested in knowing what they did at the weekend, which is fine, but I know that I should probably ask everyone that I know fairly well. Um, and as you say, the whole softening, would it be
yeah,
possible? Would it be okay with you?
yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. And in a way, I'd say I have the privilege of being able to do that. And not
yeah,
everyone will do. I think, not everyone will, yeah, maybe have that skill or capacity in terms of just even processing to do
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Certainly for me, when I write an email, I often just write the bare message. And then before I press send, I kind of look at it and think, oh, I need to go back in and do a bit of a connecting piece with the other person. But with people who know me well, I don't have to do that. And I think it maybe depends on who you're communicating with as to how necessary that is and the context. But that takes a lot, doesn't it, to flex and know. And like you said, not all of us have got the energy or capacity, certainly not all the time, to nuance the communication in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also thinking about, I suppose, processing as well. I know what I find really useful is short emails. Tell me what you want, highlight the key bits, the key actions, add headings, bullet points, so visually I can follow, and tell me that it's me, that you want me to do something, rather than, is this just for information? What is it that you want from me? I think I find it so, so helpful. And I wonder what you would say the ADHD style would be, but I think the style of communication that often, when I speak with my coaching clients, they often just want to give the full story from the very beginning to the very end.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that we sometimes work on is, okay, how can we improve that if that is something that is affecting them in the workplace? And one genius strategy that one of my clients came up with is, and I was again on the feedback of a colleague, which again I think shows how important it is to get that feedback, was, okay, so it's, the they would still write a mini essay from start to finish in that email, but they would leave it at the very end. And they would have the sort of executive summary of 3 to 5 bullet points. These are the key points. The rest is for information or for anyone who wants more background.
Yeah, it's like they're meeting their need to give a lot of information, but they're recognizing the need of the person receiving it to be
Yeah.
able to go to the summary version. For me,
Yeah.
yeah, for me, honestly, I had an email mishap only last week, and it's because it was a holiday booking, and the email heading just said booking confirmation. My brain went, great, I don't need to really, and it was a really long email, and I just thought, great, I've booked it, it's fine. My working memory meant I hadn't remembered if I'd paid for it or not, and obviously it's probably not going to be a booking confirmation if I hadn't already paid a deposit, which it turns out I hadn't. And I nearly missed the deadline. Well, I did miss the deadline, but thankfully it was still available. I was able to book, but actually that was a very long email. And in the body of it, it was saying, in order to secure your booking, use this link to make the payment. And that was way down. And I just didn't get that far. So for someone with ADHD like myself, if an email requires an action, I honestly, it's such a gift to just say action required in the subject header, just to really wave a flag saying you actually need to do something with me. But that doesn't mean you can mark every single email as urgent, because that doesn't work either.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I think that's such a good point. And I would add even more to it. I'll just say what is needed by when and why in the email
Yeah.
subject. Please pay your deposit for your holiday by X, or we will
Yes.
cancel your booking.
Yes. That would have been such a gift to me. Anyway, I did have a few moments of feeling very frustrated. But anyway, it did all work out all right in the end. So, Alicia, I have got no idea how long we've been speaking for, but it feels like a good place to wrap up this first conversation that we've been having, which has just been a little dance around some examples of differences in how people communicate, particularly autistic, ADHD, and others.
Yeah, absolutely. I also feel like we've come to a good point, and because my mind is drawing a blank, to be fair, it's been a bit of a long day. I think it's a good place to pause. So yeah, thank you so much.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. Always good to speak with you.